Stay with us. Coming up next, it's Marketplace. We'll have more All Things Considered for you at 7 o'clock tonight. It's going to be pretty chilly tonight, but I guess that's par for the course. This time of year, we're going to have temperatures in the upper 30s. Really nice weather, though, through the end of the week and then through the weekend. Tomorrow, sunny, highs in the upper 50s. For both Saturday and Sunday, partly cloudy. We'll see temperatures creep into the low 60s. It's WNYC on a Thursday at 6:30.
WNYC is supported by City Harvest. With 1 in 4 New York City children facing hunger right now, City Harvest will rescue more than 75 million pounds of food this year and deliver it to help feed the city's children and families. Learn more at cityharvest.org.
This is WNYC 93.9 FM and AM 820. NPR News and the New York Conversation.
Marketplace is supported by Live Oak Bank, helping savvy businesses optimize their high-yield online savings accounts. Rate information is at liveoakbank.com/radio.
Okay, one more word from Jay Powell on the program today. Just one, we promise. From American Public Media, this is Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Amazon Business, helping provide a smarter, easier way to get the supplies businesses need to thrive. Amazon Business, your partner for smart business buying.
In Los Angeles, I'm Kyle Risdall. It is Thursday today. This one is the 2nd of November. Good as always to have you along, everybody. We spent a bit of time yesterday reviewing Fed Chair Jay Powell's syntax during his post-meeting press conference in describing this economy and interest rates and where the central bank thinks things are going. Jay Powell, in exactly 5 words that he kept on using. Here's another one that was a close 6th on our list: resilient, as in economic growth and the labor market have been resilient, have held up surprisingly well in the face of the Fed's efforts to slow things down. Powell keeps using that word, but does it mean what he thinks it means? Marketplace's Mitchell Hartman gets us going.
Fed Chair Powell said this in his prepared statement yesterday.
We are attentive to recent data showing the resilience of economic growth and demand for labor. Evidence of growth persistently above potential, or that tightness in the labor market is no longer easing, could put further progress on inflation at risk.
Powell is warning that the economy might be too resilient as the Fed tries to slow things down to fight inflation.
It's a good question. It's like resilient. How is this a bad thing?
Former Fed economist Claudia Sahm says consumers have kept on spending in the face of soaring prices and interest rates, which should have slammed their pocketbooks. Instead, they're driving economic growth.
And this is where the good news can become bad news, in that if consumers are still spending, well, businesses can keep raising prices. In the labor market, if there's all these job options, businesses are going to have to pay higher wages to get people back.
Powell's use of the word resilient caught the attention of economist Gary Hoover at Tulane University. He wondered if the Fed chair really meant
resistant as opposed to resilient, resistant to our old models.
Namely, fighting inflation by making it more expensive to borrow and hire workers. Instead, he says inflation is coming down without an economic contraction.
It is resilient. We have such a robust economy. Despite what's happening with monetary policy, we're going to be able to get through this thing rather spectacularly.
And here's where the confusion with resiliency lies. It's ambiguous, says economist Robert Frick at Navy Federal Credit Union.
Resilience plays a dual role. If it was resilient when it was contributing to inflation, it was a bad thing.
But
right now, I think it is an unambiguously good thing, in that a soft landing is likely, certainly in the next year.
Now, Frick doesn't expect Fed Chair Powell to say that outright.
He always has to sound a note of caution. That's what Fed chairmen and chairwomen do.
But we can all still get a little excited to be living in a resilient economy. I'm Mitchell Hartman for Marketplace.
On Wall Street today, 2 other words for you: financial and conditions. We'll have the details when we do the numbers. California has more registered electric cars than any other state. Not surprising, perhaps. California, climate awareness, it kind of follows, right? In fact, last quarter, 1 in 4 new vehicles sold here was electric. 1 in 4. But that also means 3 times as many Californians who bought new vehicles stuck with gas. Why? Well, it depends on what zip code you live in and, related, how much money you have. KCRW's Kaylee Wells talked to EV drivers about why they made the switch, and to gas-powered drivers, too, about why they didn't.
For a lot of people above a certain income threshold, becoming an EV driver is kind of a no-brainer. That's how it was for Joey Gill, who's owned his Tesla for 5 years.
I've always been like an early adopter and a bit of a techie. And once I test drove it, it was just really nice.
Most of those new EVs are parked in front of households with high incomes, like in West LA. That's where Gill works with Plasma as a research scientist. So why do EV drivers like him drive EVs? A couple of things. One, says Gill.
So we do care about, reducing carbon footprint.
He's concerned about climate change. The other big reason? EVs are cheaper to drive. If drivers can get past the high price tag up front, EVs tend to save them money in the long run on gas and maintenance.
Definitely the financial piece was a motivator.
In 2021, Tiffany Gage went all in on electric. She replaced her family's 2 gas vehicles with Teslas. That's partly because the gas bill was so high with her husband's 100-mile daily commute.
The fact that, like, my husband was commuting, it only made sense that we go electric because we'd be spending $10,000+ in gas a year.
But both Tiffany Gage and Joey Gill own their houses. They installed EV chargers at home and even put solar panels on their roofs to make charging their cars more affordable. But LA neighborhoods that have low EV adoption rates tend to have more renters, and often they can't charge at home. Plus, those places tend to have fewer public car chargers. Take Anna Meny, who used to work for the city of Carson in South LA County. She says she's sticking with her gas-powered Toyota Camry because in her city, it's more convenient.
I can go around every single block and find a gas station. I can't find charging stations.
There is money set aside in the Inflation Reduction Act to help pay for more, but it'll take a while for those federal dollars to get to the local level and for those chargers to come online. Many also mentioned another big barrier. The sticker price of an EV is typically higher.
What they deem affordable electric vehicles, they're starting at the $30,000 range.
Combine that with interest rates at the highest they've been in 15 years, it's just not doable for a lot of car buyers. California does have a program to help low-income drivers buy an EV, but the funding is almost dried up, and there's a wait list for what little money is left. Plus, even if affording the EV and finding a charger near home isn't a problem, the last big barrier is as old as EVs themselves.
Range anxiety, that is the correct term.
Susan Lowry of Lancaster, California, worries that she'll get stranded. She's retired and loves to go camping in her gas-powered Ford F-150. One of her favorite drives is some 400 desolate miles from Tahoe to Utah.
Stunningly beautiful.
It's even called the loneliest road in America. And even though new EVs can go much farther on a single charge than they did early on, Lowry is skeptical.
We don't go places where things are easily found. I mean, next summer's big trip is going to be to Alaska.
The Inflation Reduction Act includes money set aside to put more universal car chargers in rural and low-income areas. Even if that takes a while, Lowry says she knows she should make the switch and thinks it's the right thing to do.
It's all about sacrifice.
And if she has to give up one of her favorite drives on a lonely road through Nevada, Lowry says she's willing to do that. In Los Angeles, I'm Kaylee Wells for Marketplace.
With home prices where they are, high, and mortgage rates where they are, also high, consider this. Zillow did some number crunching and figured out it would take the typical home buyer about 13 and a half years to break even. And therein lies the reason, one of the reasons, that fewer people are buying homes right now. Mindy Palmer is one of the real estate agents we talk to from time to time. She's with Berkshire Hathaway Montana Properties in Missoula, Montana.
In my scope of things, I'm just tiptoeing into my 26th year full time in this market. And it's almost a bit unnerving how remarkably quiet the market is right now. I attribute it all solely to those stinking interest rates. One of the major factors that we're seeing in our marketplace right now are out-of-state buyers making contingency offers on property here. By contingency, I mean that it's contingent upon them, that buyer, selling their property in XYZ state. In some cases, they could have a buyer that has to sell their property in order to pursue theirs. So it becomes a real domino effect. That is definitely a big segment of the market. They want to move here. They just can't get their places sold where they're living. Prices have expanded, risen, soared, take your pick. I run into people every day asking me about the real estate market in general. And gosh, my house is worth a fortune. And boy, I'd love to sell it, but I don't have anywhere to go. And that is very true. When you can't afford to replace your own setup, you might as well sit tight. My own business, I'm still doing the same numbers, but half the amount of transactions. And you know, while I'm used to the frenetic pace of 30, 40 contracts a year, I've welcomed the breathability of this pace. I'm enjoying being able to take midweek hikes.
Mindy Palmer, hiking and selling houses when she can in Missoula, Montana. You can tell us your real estate story, your housing story, whatever story you like, actually. Marketplace.org is where you do that. Coming up.
These days, I don't know if anybody's really making them anymore.
The end of an era, perhaps. But first, let's do the numbers. Yeah, it is the really happy music today. Dow Industrial's up 564 points, 1 7/10%, 33,839. The NASDAQ lifted 232 points. That's 1.8% there. Closed at 13,294. The S&P 500 added 79 points, about 1 9/10%, and things at 43,17. Hey, listen, have you started your holiday shopping yet? Apparently, there is a significant number of people who can confidently answer yes to that question. Who are you people? Anyway, data's from the National Retail Federation. 43% of the shoppers they surveyed said they started their holiday shopping before November. Again, who are you people? Consumers also said they're planning to spend an average of $875 on gifts, decorations, and food this holiday season. You're listening to Marketplace.
The Marketplace Numbers segment is supported by Odoo, simple management software for all your business needs. Marketplace is supported by Fortra, a software company dedicated to simplifying today's complex cybersecurity landscape by bringing complementary products together to solve problems in innovative ways. Learn more at fortra.com. And by Pi Insurance. Pi's Insurance is designed to be as easy as pie from quote to claim, with coverage built specifically for small businesses in 38 states and Washington, D.C. Learn more from your agent or at iwantpi.com. And by the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, a nonpartisan organization dedicated to raising awareness and accelerating action on America's fiscal challenges to build a brighter economic future for the next generation. Learn more at pgpf.org.
WNYC supporters include Paul Taylor Dance Company performing now through November 12th at Lincoln Center, with guests Vanessa Williams, Trio, Time for Three, and the Orchestra of St. Luke's performing live at each event. Tickets at boxoffice.dance.
I'm Brian Lehrer. Your participation made a big difference in WNYC's Pledge Drive. At WNYC, we don't answer to shareholders, we answer to our listeners, you. Because of that, we can bring you the type of news and talk programs that you only hear on public radio. If you missed the pledge drive, you can still support WNYC anytime by visiting WNYC.org or by calling 888-376-WNYC. And thanks.
You're listening to Marketplace on WNYC. Coming up in the 7 o'clock hour of All Things Considered, years of research on kids in Gaza have found high rates of post-traumatic stress and depression as a result of being exposed to chronic ethnic political violence. Well, that and more at 7 o'clock.
This is Marketplace. I'm Kai Ryssdal. We probably should have put this before the numbers, but we do like to spread the macroeconomic stuff out across the program. Makes it easier to digest, we believe. I mentioned financial conditions up at the top of the program. Well, here's why. It's possible, it's likely even, that what's been happening in the bond market, yields going up, as we've been telling you, it's possible that those tighter financial conditions might actually take pressure off the Fed to raise or even keep rates elevated for as long as they've been saying it. Powell was asked about it yesterday.
In this case, the tighter financial conditions we're seeing from higher long-term rates, but also from other sources like the stronger dollar and lower equity prices could matter for future rate decisions as long as two conditions are satisfied.
Condition number one.
The first is that the tighter conditions would need to be persistent, and that is something that remains to be seen.
And two.
The second thing is that the longer term rates that have moved up, they can't simply be a reflection of expected policy moves from us. That we would then, that if we didn't follow through on them, then the rates would come back down.
I actually think those are the same thing, right? Both of those things. For tighter financial conditions to take pressure off the Fed, longer term bond yields, the 10-year that we talk about all the time, it has to stay higher for longer. Now, here is why I went through all of that. Today, the bond market looked at what Powell said yesterday and said, yeah, no. The yield on the 10-year fell back down to 4.6%. It was at 5 a week ago. Also, as I said, stock prices today boomed. So looser financial conditions. According to the National Weather Service, its National Data Buoy Center, should you be curious, the winds off Virginia Beach, Virginia today are out of the east-northeast at 5 knots, gusting to 10 tomorrow and Saturday. That's of interest because there is news of the offshore wind economy. The Biden administration has approved another big wind farm set to be built off the coast of Virginia Beach, the 5th such commercial-scale project the administration has approved as it shoots to get 30 gigawatts of offshore wind energy up and running by 2030. All is not smooth sailing, though, if I can mix my metaphors. Financial and logistical challenges abound with these offshore projects, even after they've gotten federal approval. Case in point, Ørsted, which is a major wind developer, said this week it's pulling out of 2 projects that it's been planning off the coast of New Jersey. Marketplace's Samantha Fields has that one.
When the pandemic started, Abe Silverman was about to redo his kitchen.
And you know what? When those prices started going up, we stepped back, and the contractor stepped back.
Silverman at Columbia's Center on Global Energy Policy says that's effectively what happened with Ørsted pulling out of those 2 big wind projects off the coast of New Jersey. The company had bid on them before the pandemic and the war in Ukraine caused major supply chain issues, and before prices and interest rates started to rise. Now it's decided the math doesn't work anymore.
The problem is building these projects. They're very, very expensive. Almost all big clean energy projects are capital intensive.
David Victor at the University of California, San Diego says building offshore wind projects in particular also takes a long time, which means a lot can change. This time around,
2 things have changed. One is that siting has proved more challenging. Siting, interconnection with the grid, that delays these projects. The other thing, much more important, is that interest rates have gone up.
And it's all just become much more expensive. But inflation, interest rates, and supply chain issues aside, Chris Oleth at the Special Initiative on Offshore Wind says offshore wind is also just harder to build and connect to the grid than other renewables, at least right now.
And that is because offshore wind is a nascent industry here in the United States. It's still a relatively new technology, and therefore the supply chain is very new. The interconnection concepts are very new. We don't have a well-heeled permitting structure and regulatory regime.
Solar and onshore wind, meanwhile, have been around longer and have already worked through more of those growing pains. Abe Silverman at Columbia says he thinks offshore wind will too, in time, and that the economic factors at play now won't always be a barrier.
I think there's a strong case to be made that this is a blip that will, not necessarily dim the long-term prospects for offshore wind.
Partly, he says, because it will be hard for the U.S. to decarbonize without it. I'm Samantha Fields for Marketplace.
It's not officially a strike or a work stoppage or anything else resembling traditional organized labor, which has had so much success this year. But pharmacists at retail drug chains have had about enough and want people to know about it. The social media hashtag is Pharmageddon, as some pharmacists at retail pharmacies have walked off the job this week. CVS and Walgreens say disruptions were minor, but these walkouts do follow similar actions around the country last month, a sign of the strains in a key part of the healthcare economy. Marketplace's Savannah Marr has more on that one.
When pharmacist Bled Tanaway started working for a drugstore chain in 2016, she says her lean staff was already overworked. Then came the pandemic.
I could really feel a shift within my team.
On top of filling prescriptions, Tanaway and her coworkers were running a busy vaccine clinic. She says she asked her supervisor for a break on prescription quotas and other corporate performance metrics.
And the answer was no. You are still expecting to perform like you are supposed to perform.
Already burned out, Tanaway believes the pressure led her to make a mistake. In 2021, she quit.
And for me, that was my breaking point, because I could not stay there and put my patient in danger.
Tanaway now works at a hospital in Oklahoma City, but she still helped organize this week's retail pharmacist walkouts. Anandi Law, with the American Association of Colleges of Pharmacy, says persistent understaffing and profit-driven performance quotas at these chains mean worse patient counseling.
There's constantly this at our back saying, fill more, get those prescriptions out. But we are not able to dedicate that time, much needed time, for our patients.
Law says part of the solution is increased staffing at retail pharmacies. But chains like CVS and Walgreens say filling open positions is tough. Richard Dang, a professor of clinical pharmacy at USC, says there's actually no shortage of pharmacists looking for work.
However, there are many graduates and many individuals in the profession who are hesitant to work in a chain setting where they don't feel supported.
That's why many of his students look for work in clinical settings after as many as 7 years of schooling. Dang says most retail pharmacists don't belong to a union, but these recent walkouts could lead to more interest in organizing. I'm Savannah Marr for Marketplace.
Apple had another product launch this week, Zippier chips, better, faster MacBooks. You've probably seen the coverage because Apple. In September, though, the company made arguably a more significant move. It discontinued the iPhone mini, the last of its distinctly small devices on the market. And this is kind of a trend. Gone are the days of the BlackBerry and the flip phone that easily slid into your back pocket. Today, phones are just bigger. And where, oh, where do you suppose all the good small phones have gone? Sean Hollister is a senior editor at The Verge who wrote about his hunt for a small phone. Sean, welcome to the program.
It's so good to be here.
So you go on this journey for a smaller phone. What did you find?
Well, I went out looking on Google to see if I could find guides to the phone I should buy after my iPhone 13 mini, because I do love the small one-headed phones. And all the guides that I found on the internet were directing me to phones that were not only just a little bit bigger, but much bigger.
So let me just say I'm with you on the whole phone thing. I have average size hands, as you do in this piece, and I have to do that whole one-handed keyboard thing so my thumb can reach and that whole deal. But before we get into the results of your search, why do you think they are so hard to find now?
What I've been told by companies, by carriers, is that people just want bigger phones with big, beautiful screens. But what I've found every time I've gone looking is that consumers were never really given a choice. When we migrated away from QWERTY keyboards on phones, to the first iPhones and Galaxy Nexus phones that made use of touchscreens instead, there wasn't really a time period in there where they said, we're going to bring out a flagship keyboard phone and a flagship touchscreen phone and let consumers choose. They just migrated all the way to the big screen phones. Similarly, with the iPhone mini was just one possibility out of a market of usually much larger phones than that.
Well, so who still is making, in your mind, well, let me ask you first, what constitutes a good small phone? And then let me ask you who's making them.
The most important thing to know is that screen size is not phone size. If somebody says, I have a 4.7-inch phone to sell you, they mean that the screen is 4.7 inches diagonally, but the actual phone might be a good bit larger than that. Today's standard phone is about 6 inches tall and about 3 inches wide. And so you got to stretch wider, you got to stretch taller. It's just much more difficult to manage in one hand.
So who's making them?
These days, I don't know if anybody's really making them anymore. Sony used to sell a phone called the Xperia Compact. These days, their phones are much bigger than that. Even folding flip phones. I have a Samsung Galaxy Flip right now in front of me. They're smaller to put in your pocket because they fold down into a pocket square when they're closed. But open, they're as big as an iPhone 15 Pro Max. They're as big as the biggest phones out there.
I wonder if you realize that your quest here is a little bit quixotic, right? That it's always going to be bigger is better, and I want more pixels and a bigger screen, and I don't care if I have to use two hands to do it.
Oh, I think I do at this point. That's why back in the physical keyboard days, I was like, I'm going to ride or die with this Droid 4. And I rode and I died. I mean, the phone gave up on me. And so this time I'm not sticking with that. I'm moving on. I've got my Galaxy Flip phone, and we're going to see how it works out.
Well, best of luck to you. Sean Hollister, senior editor at The Verge, talking about phone size. I'm with you, Sean.
Thank you so much for having me.
This final note on the way out today, we try not to do math on this program, but the macroeconomic formula of the day on this Thursday is widgets produced per hour worked. The answer gets you worker productivity in this economy, which we learned this morning rose at an annualized rate of 4.7% in the third quarter. Productivity growth, among other things, means labor costs companies less per unit of goods sold, which then can keep inflationary pressures in check.
Marketplace is supported by Betterment, the automated investing platform that helps make it easy to be invested for the long term. Learn more at Betterment.com. Investing involves risk.
All right, we are out of here. One more moment of economic context, though. It's from the looser financial conditions file. Think back to what I was saying about Powell. Freddie Mac said today the average rate on a 30-year fixed mortgage fell for the first time in almost 2 months. It's still high, 7.76%, but lower. John Buckley, John Gordon, Rick Carr, Diantha Parker, Amanda Peacher, and Stephanie Seek are the Marketplace editing staff. Amir Bibawi is the managing editor. I'm Kai Ryssdal. We will see you tomorrow, everybody. This is 8 p.m.